Good morning.
Good morning, everyone.
Welcome.
This is the last day of January, January 31st,
My goodness,
2021. Yeah, the month went by
it's been a
really
long
quickly.
year.
And we're going to talk today. I'm going to start with an opening prayer that's written by our founder, Ernest Holmes. The month of February and his daily prayers, called 365, is the theme is love. So the name of this prayer is God's presence in me is love. The divine presence within me is everlasting love. The action of love is expressed in my world. God's wisdom holds me steady, and the peace of God fills me. I am his creation, understood, wanted, and cared for. From this infinite source, I give and receive love in my world. If petty emotions seem to trouble me, I immediately turn to the source within me of strength and peace. God in me does the loving, and I have no fear. Kindness and understanding are shown to me. I bless anyone who seems to disturb me. I know how to love those who are dear to me and love them more each day. As our love grows, so we grow as individuals. God in me is never troubled. Nothing can take love from me or keep it out of my heart. Love enters freely, and there is no restriction to it. I come into this world to love, and I am loving. I express my love for God, a boundless gratitude because I live. God rejoices for me because of and by means of me. I'm going to repeat that last line. God rejoices for me because of and by means of me. And so it is.
God, God in me, as me, is me.
All right. God in me, as me, is me. And
That's a really good place to start with our talk today, which is about belonging. When we start thinking about that statement, God in me, as me, is me, our, our history, our experience is God near me, God somewhere above me, God somewhere else that I hope to connect to, but not God as me. In fact, I think we get in trouble very often as a teaching when people hear, you're saying you're God. And yes, we are God, and so are you, and everyone has an equal amount or has an equal share of God, and that's I guess heretical for some, but it starts to move us into the area we want to talk about today, which is belonging, and who do we and what do we belong to?
yeah, it is and it isn't heretical,
Well, I
because
think it isn't really,
it's
but it,
often Christians who get very upset with that concept that God, and yet they believe God is within them. And they certainly, the New Testament says, be ye of the same mind that is in Christ Jesus. And so they believe that when they're Christians, Jesus is with them. And that's what we're saying, and that we are made of that same God stuff. And whether you know it or not, whether you express it or not, it's there. It's there. But when you know it, it's very comforting. It's very rewarding, and it's very mm, what's the word I'm looking for? Assuring. It's very assuring. You can release all fear when you know God is with you. So the fear we're talking about today is this sense of not belonging. It's kind of a universal things with human beings, I think. Um, the fear of not belonging. And it starts in childhood. And, kids can be very cruel.
well, and very early on, when we do something that's not liked by our family, very
Mm.
often the first thing that's done to us is we are banished, we are put aside or moved away from, or go sit in a corner, or go.
Go to your room.
You can't be with us.
Right,
And so what we're taught is that being alone is punishment, that being alone is abandonment, that being alone is not belonging. And
right.
so we carry with us often this desire to belong that is just never answered. And it's often like a quiet headache in the background that says, oh, if I could just belong. And then when we belong, I remember, I think it was the Marx Brothers who first said I wouldn't want to belong to a club that would have a member like me, or that would have me as a member. And I thought, God, and I heard that the first time Woody Allen said that in a movie. I thought, my God, that's so true. We are so hard on ourselves. So we live in this state of not belonging. At the same time, we think of ourselves as spiritual beings, as conduits for good and for love. And I think, wow, how does that actually gel?
Well, and you're right, it does start with families. And I remember when we first met and started discussing our families, we were surprised that we had so much in common. Churchman is my birth name. And so the Churchman tribe, you know, mythology was that we were stronger and smarter and harder working than everybody else. And if you were a churchman, you knew that. And there was a lot of pride in that.
As it was for the Luckens.
Exactly.
We were actually on that ladder, we were just one step above you, and we didn't talk about it.
But, there was always the fear of being banished from the tribe
Yeah, yeah,
if
yeah.
you didn't
Yeah.
go along, share the same religion,
Clean your
whatever.
clean your room, wash behind your ears, and
Yeah,
there would be something that could do you in. Yeah.
right.
Steal that last chocolate that my father had hidden.
So it starts in the family, this desire to belong. And of course, you, as children, you needed a safety. You need the safety from your family. And then you venture out. And I remember for me, the first venturing out that I recall was in first grade. And I wasn't even 5 years old yet to start first grade. So I was still four. And it was the first time I had ever been away from my mother. We never had a babysitter. Once in a while, we stayed with the neighbors, but they were friends. So this was really traumatic for me. And who were all these strange people? How did I know I could trust them with my well being? I cried the whole day. So it was just scary going out into the world. And what in the world are we afraid of? Well, we're afraid we don't belong with this group of people. We don't know that they'll have our safety in mind. And then I did okay the next day, by the way. I learned it was safe. But a lot of my safety came from being with my sister, who was just 16 months older than me. So she was always just one grade ahead, and we walked to school together and we did everything together. And she was mean to me like sisters are to their younger siblings.
We'll talk about that another time, but then there's a
But
lot to say.
there was still, we were really taught by our family that you you stick up for your sister. So there was kind of safety in that. And that definitely was not necessarily with the other kids.
So the breakaway here is that we spend a lot of our time wanting to belong to something, but really what we're talking about today is belonging to yourself. That we think we don't belong, period. And we know that in part also from the kind of body shaming that we see every day. I mean, I must see 50 commercials a day that talk about the body that you could have if only you would do the right thing or eat the right foods or exercise with the right machinery. And of course, the people that they're showing you on television that have done it all probably never gained a pound in their entire life. They were models, the exercise people. But the bottom line is that there's disapproval, this disapproving of ourselves. And we have to overcome that, or at least we have to deal with that if we're going to be our authentic self, if we're going to allow ourselves to heal ourselves. How can you heal yourself of something when you don't believe you're worth healing, when you don't believe that you belong to even yourself?
Right. The phrase that we're using, and we got it from Brene Brown's podcast.
By the way, if you haven't listened to her, she's outstanding. You need to.
Yes, and can you remember the name of her podcast? Unlocking Us.
Yeah,
Unlocking Us.
I think it's
It's on
unlocking us.
Spotify. Right, you're right.
Yeah.
But the phrase she says that she uses whenever she's um, a little feeling vulnerable, feeling a little scared, because she came out with her political opinions. Oh no. Right before the elections, and she did that on social media, and she lives in Dallas, Texas. So she never revealed her political opinions, but I just know the area and know what mostly she got attacked by. And now if she's a sociologist, and she's been an activist for 30 years. I know her politics too. So she was attacked so, and her family so vehemently that it really made her want to stand up and fight. She said her go-to is, you know, strong back, strong front. She's going to fight with everything. That's her natural stance. But she reminds herself with this saying that's called strong back, soft front, wild heart. So the rest of our talk will be about explaining that because that is the way we want to be in the world.
Mhm.
You want to start, Bob?
No, go ahead.
Okay. Strong back. You know, a lot of people that are in attack mode are doing a strong front, but they're really weak backboned. You know,
Mhm.
they're just in an attack mode. So a strong back means I'm strong. I know what I believe and I can stand up for myself. But the soft front is about being vulnerable, being open to listen, being able to have intimate conversations.
Which is the strongest, most courageous thing you can do.
Yes,
It's not courageous to be insulated and isolated and separated in order to protect yourself. That's really, it's an indication of a lot of weakness that you haven't been able to manage very well. And so to be able to be vulnerable, which is something that we often in our culture don't look at positively, is to say yes to listening, to say yes to opening the heart to ideas and things that don't necessarily match what you have come to believe, but you're strong enough, your back is strong enough to be able to withstand the shock of something that doesn't match, doesn't fit, but is worth considering. And so the first step in this is to consider a world that's bigger than the one that we're living in, and to consider giving ourselves permission to live in this world that's bigger than we live in without immediately being judgmental or, or putting up a hard front against it.
right. And the wild heart
I like
was
that idea.
um, the wild here refers really to wilderness. It's the ability to be in the wilderness alone, belonging to no one and nothing, and being clear about who you are and what you believe, and being true to that. And it's something that we must come to if we're true to ourselves. And I think this teaching where we believe that we're one with the divine and the divine lives in us and we're a part of it, you don't ever have to worry about being alone because you're always with God, which is everything. So how can you be alone? But we have to be brave enough sometimes to depart from the company of others, to be willing to go our own way and to be who we truly are. I'm sure you can think of moments when you had to do that in your life, um, and and that's strength. That's knowing who you are. I know when Jesus went and spent 30 days in the wilderness, they said, you know, those were days of fasting and meditation, and he was really getting clear about who he was and what was his mission, what was he here for. And, you know, when he went back, he shook things up. He was
Mhm.
not teaching traditional Judaism. he
Right.
was he was teaching his own teaching.
Yeah, we need to be able to stay in the wilderness until it isn't a wilderness anymore,
Exactly.
until it's a place that we can embrace, until it's a place we go to willingly and joyfully. And I think so much of our daily living is about avoiding what we think is a wilderness, which is me being alone with my own thoughts and with me having no identity beyond the identity that's given to me by other people that I associate or affiliate with.
Right. See, what we always try to do is fit in. You know, that's what you learn as a child. Well, if I'm gonna feel like I belong with this group, I have to
Get along.
dress,
You have to learn to get
I
along.
have to get along. I have to be a people pleaser, not rock the boat. I have to watch how they dress and try to dress that same way, act that same way, so I'll be part of that tribe. You know, Mark Nepo has this
I
saying I
like this.
love, that, you know, in the early days where were these tribes and other tribes would come around, and you might be of the tribe of the when another tribe comes, you're different, go away. You're different. We don't trust you, go away. Or you could be of the tribe. You're different. Come closer. Let me learn from you. And it would be nice if children could do that, but they're not. They're not. They're the if you're different, go away. So we try to learn to fit in, all of which might be adaptive in the short run, but it really takes you out of your wild heart and where you are who you are. And the interesting thing about that is who we really appreciate and pay big bucks to are the people who are individuals in this
Right.
world,
Well, it's a
creatives.
real paradox because musicians and artists are good examples of that. Is that
Yeah.
what do you do for a living? I'm an artist. I mean, now what do you really do? And then you become successful. Could I have your autograph? Let's see how this works. I'm a nobody and I'm a nothing until I am the exception to the rule, and then you want to identify. But we actually all want to identify with that exception to the rule. We all want to be something out of what seems to be the nothing rather than out of the same thing everybody else is. So there's this desire for us to have that wild heart out and open. Interestingly enough, we celebrate the people who've had the courage to display it, but we discourage them from doing it.
Well, they get discouraged just by the censure that they get from others, right?
Yeah.
So it can take courage, and especially politically now, and we're not going to talk about politics, but their tendency is to get strong fronts, strong backs, and just go at each other, which doesn't solve anything. So so we just want to stand in our truth, know our truth, be who we are, and not seek to belong. Maya Angelou says that oops, I'm gonna have to look that quote up because as soon as I started to say it, I couldn't think of it. Here we go. We belong nowhere and everywhere. The price is high and the reward is great. To belong nowhere and everywhere. So the everywhere, that's like knowing we belong to the universe and we are at home wherever we go, and not need to feel like we belong with any particular group or time. For example, she says, when you walk into a room, quit scanning the room to see if you belong, because the same thing will happen that always happens. You will decide you don't belong because that's what you already believe. So stop it. Just stop it and stand in your wild heart.
So that becomes even a bigger deal when we think about our spirituality, which is the most intimate part of our own being, our own nature. That if we can't be with ourselves, if we can't accept that we are something, that we have value, then our spirituality is dwarfed. Our spirituality is as small as the smallest part of ourselves, or it's as grand as the vision we have of ourselves in relationship to the universe. I woke up at 2 o'clock this morning and there was nothing I could do because nobody else was up, nobody to talk to. I wasn't hungry, so I just laid there in bed thinking, what am I going to do? And I thought, I guess I'll have a conversation with the divine. And so I asked who else was out there, and I said, well, let's talk. And I saw some colors and had some wonderful feelings, and waves of emotion came. And I think we had a conversation, whoever we included. And I thought, isn't it interesting that as soon as I agreed that it was okay to be in that space, I was no longer alone, even though nobody else seemed to be there. And so there's a coming to terms with belonging to ourselves. And I think belonging to our spiritual selves as well. Now, I want to contrast that with an awful lot of our upbringing. Many of us were brought up to believe that we had to qualify in this life for the next one, and that if we did well and qualified well, we could go to heaven. But somebody was keeping score, and there was a possibility that any number of errors could keep us from getting in. To live your entire life trying to qualify is very different than living your life like you are qualified. And I know they did some research at Harvard University years ago, and they were surprised to find that 90% or some large percentage of the Harvard graduates felt that they were fakes, that they hadn't really,
Imposters.
yeah, the imposters. I think they said that. I felt like they were imposters. And I thought, Yeah, because what you're told that you're going to be doesn't often match the being that you are. So for healing to take place, and I'm talking about healing a second time now in this conversation, healing is the realization of your own divinity. Healing is the
That's
realization
right.
of the connection you have to the infinite that cannot be separated from you, that you can't lose. And so when we experience that, when we allow ourselves to know and believe that, that's a whole different you than often you walk around with every day.
Yeah. And in that part, you can be vulnerable. Uh, Brene Brown says vulnerability, that's that soft front, is the birthplace of intimacy, love, joy, and courage. So we have a tendency to think of this vulnerability as a weakness. It's not weakness at all. It's huge strength. It's the willingness to be in your soft heart, and invite the come closer tribe in. And
I remember when I shared this, I won't share the whole story again because I shared it once before, but the Doberman that was let out of the house to attack me. And as he was
you
running,
were selling
yeah,
something,
it was selling Fuller Brush, my very first job. And he was running across the yard to attack me. But you see, he was running across the yard to attack somebody who was dangerous. In his mind, I was a danger to the property. His owner had said I was a danger to the property and let him out so that he could attack me. So he had this strong front, he had this strong back, he had this willingness to fight. I sat down on the floor, on the ground, and just looked at him, and he hadn't ever seen somebody when he was in the middle of wanting to attack, sit down on the ground and just look at him. And I turned my head, and he turned his head, and he slowed down and he looked at me. See, he didn't know what to do anymore because attacking wasn't the only possibility.
yeah, you became vulnerable
Yeah, so I became vulnerable. So he then rolled over on his back
and became
and became
vulnerable.
vulnerable and said, "If you could just rub my belly just a little bit, things would go so much better." And so there I am sitting on the lawn of a woman who didn't want me on her lawn, rubbing the belly of a dog that was supposed to attack me. We both had great strength and we both had become vulnerable and we both had wild hearts.
Yes, that's a great story. Well, you might do as I do when you contemplate this and go back into your history and think of all the times you decided that you didn't belong, and rethink those.
Mhm.
I mean, I know the events that happened, but your conclusion wasn't necessarily accurate, which is that your conclusion was that you don't belong. Excuse me, I'm going to have to. And what's true is that you may have been different.
You know what Werner Erhard said? I did the EST training years and years and years ago, which was really quite a revolutionary thing to do in the early in the 70s. And he was insistent that people come on time. And I said, "Well, what's the big deal with coming on time?" He said, "Because if you don't come on time, when you're there, you're not present. You're there with your story about why you're late. You're there trying to qualify for being there as opposed to being there." And I've thought about that a lot of times since then, how many times I've spent not where I say I am, but trying to qualify to be there and still not there.
Sorry.
If we're moving in and out of, you notice we just disappear, that's because we're actually holographs from another dimension.
This is true. This is true. I didn't hear what you last said.
I can't repeat it.
Okay.
No, I was talking about Werner Erhard's the S training when he said we need to be on time because who shows up when you show up late? You don't show up late. You show up with your story about not being on time. You show up with your excuse. You know, we often show up for events with our excuse about why we qualify rather than here I am, and and without even noticing that. So part of what I'm getting at today is notice how many times you have to pre-qualify yourself for the life you're living. Notice yourself and how many times you have to do something to get to qualify in order to be wherever you are. Today we're taking a big risk and sharing this. We're both doing this. I'm doing this barefoot, and
Oh no.
oh yes, no shoes. I mean, talk about stepping out.
Well, therefore we belong.
Yeah, she's got her sandals on. She's
I-
kind
I've
of playing
seen,
halfway
seen so many cute pictures of people
with
working from home
with her jackets
with
and
the
underwear,
jackets and ties on, and then their
pajama
shorts
bottoms. Yeah,
and fuzzy slippers.
yeah. We actually don't know what we're going to do when this is all over. We'll probably go out in public wearing, I'll wear a jacket, suit jacket, and a tie and pajama bottoms. Yeah.
So back to the sense of belonging. Certainly, with our teaching, we are our spiritual teaching. We're in the minority. We're not. I've been in this. Let's see, what is 1973 till now? It's a long time.
Yeah.
It's almost
Over
50
20 years.
years. Almost, yeah. And you have to stand in your truth. You don't have to convince everybody else you're right. You don't have to preach and proselytize. We don't. Um, but it takes strength of character to be different and to not need to belong with your tribe's religion or things like that.
You reminded me though of somebody who said 50 years, 50 years ago, or more than that, in 1971 or 72, I read the Seth material by Jane Roberts, and I resonated with it. I thought, oh my God, this is so true. It's incredible. And 50 years later, I'm reading the same book again. I'm not the same person I was 50 years
I
ago. I
guess
don't
not.
have the same beliefs I had 50 years ago, but I'm in agreement with it. And so when we say I have believed what I believe, actually we haven't believed what we believe. We've reconfigured it, we've rethought it, we've changed it, we've warped it, we've improved it.
It's true.
We're not who we were 50 years ago. So it's a good time not to be holding yourself to what you did or thought or believed 50 years ago. Even worse than that is you shouldn't have to defend it. You shouldn't have to defend a belief you've had for 60 or 70 years that's gone through 50 or 60 or 70 years of change. All you can say is I'm in process.
Right. And I find that with my tribe, I don't have a need to defend it or convert anybody. But I think actually now, after 50 years, I'm actually appreciated for my beliefs because I don't proselytize or think everybody needs to believe what I believe. But it's an important part of standing in the wild heart is to say this is what I believe, and I don't care what my tribe that I grew up with believes. This is what's true for me. And as Maya Angelou says, that takes great courage, and yet it has great rewards.
Mhm. So before we move into our closing treatment, which we're going to do shortly, I want to also do a public address announcement here and say that we are cslpalmbeaches.org for those of you who want to make a generous donation to the Center for Spiritual Living. You can go on
Just
our web.
consider this our collection time.
Yes,
We're
yes,
passing the basket.
that's right. And we're going to keep passing it every week. And because we do have expenses, we are a not-for-profit organization who uh, needs your support in order to continue to do what we're doing.
And if you go to that website, there's a button that says donate or ways to donate. And so it's very easy for you to do. We appreciate it. And we know that that is your saying into the law of mind that I have enough to spare and to share, and that it circulates and returns to me, pressed down, flowing over, and multiplied. So are we ready to do a closing
Yeah,
prayer?
this I was wanted to say this what we're doing is working in a far grander way than anybody ever could have imagined. I think that we're reaching out and touching people all over the country that we didn't. So on the one hand, we've had to stop meeting physically. On the other hand, we seem to have a physical presence now unlike anything we could have imagined.
Hmm.
And so don't be afraid to stretch in mind into an area that you haven't thought of or considered before and giving it another chance because this may be the perfect time for you to increase your world. For me, part of my little world, the world that I thought was small, was wrote a little book called The Diary of a Mindful Dog. And we just got notice a while ago that it sold 1,000 copies. And I've
In the
just got
first quarter.
first quarter, and I've gotten notice now that they published 3,000 more. And I'm letting you know that because it was a little idea that became a bigger idea that all I needed to do was to get out of the way of the idea and encourage it.
Hmm. And you know, I don't think we have it on the website. We need
No, we don't, but
to
you can
do
go
that.
to Diary of a Mindful Dog, and I'm also telling you this because since the publisher has published 3,000 more copies, I need each of you to buy at least 10 more copies.
And it's available on Amazon, right?
It is, yeah, and
Yeah.
through divorce.
Okay.
So why don't we end with a treatment?
Let's do.
Treatment is what we prayer, what we call prayer. What you call prayer is what we call treatment,
Spiritual mind treatment.
right?
Yes. So let's go within and recognize the truth of our being, which is that we are one. We're one with our Creator. We are one with all of life. And we could not be alone if we wanted to. So we choose to be reminded that all the love, all the power, all the wisdom of God is ours for our expression through the law of mind. We give thanks for this reminder, knowing that we belong to the universe. There is no place we need to belong separate from that because we belong everywhere. Our belonging comes from our own sense of knowing who we are and our worth. And so that knowledge makes all our interactions go more smoothly, go easily. We choose to be with a strong back, knowing our beliefs and our worth, and having a soft front of vulnerability and that wild heart to know the truth that we're one with the universe. We give thanks, we release, and together we say,
And so it is.
and so it is.
So we'll stop recording now, and we'll join our group, and we'll join our tribe.